Okay, I'll be brief and then we will introduce Caroline Haythornthwaite. I'm wearing a tracker which is telling me that my heart rate is going much faster than usual. It's quite a daunting crowd, but it's great to see so many familiar faces and new faces at the conference. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning, of which I'm a part. And that's in the Department of Educational Research, who have also kindly provided the bags and the pens. So I've been asked to say thank you for those. So that's great. When we started planning this 2 years ago, it seemed like a kind of distant dream to bring the conference back here. And it's amazing now to see everybody here and to see such a promising programme. And I'm very proud to be hosting it here. It really is great. I think the only other official announcement I have to make is that on page 21, I think it is, of your programmes, it actually asks you to email questions to us, which will be part of the closing plenary. So we're asking you to put forward questions and then we'll consider them and try and make an interesting mix out of those, which will be answered in the closing plenary. Have I got the right page number? Okay, brilliant. So you need to email those to the Network Learning Committee, and then we're hoping to discuss them in the hot tub, I think, on outside. Okay, and just finally to say, I very much hope that you'll enjoy the conference. It's been a real pleasure working with these guys and Nina, putting it together. So I hope that comes across and you have a fine conference here. And I should say thank you to the weather, which we went to quite a lot of trouble towards. Okay. I'd like to hand over to Caroline now. Caroline's been long involved in network learning. I imagine that you actually know Caroline much more than you do me. It's kind of recent joining the conference. Okay, Caroline started research looking at learning communities and is currently looking at motivations to contribute to online learning, and also has a grant on online crowds and communities, and also has a grant on social media and learning. Is also an editor, a co-editor of the Handbook of E-Learning, which is now just moving to its second edition. So that's the marketing bit. And is also an executive member of the Society for Learning Analytics. Okay, I'm happy to welcome you to the conference, Caroline. Thank you.
A wonderful start to my paper, because that was the past, and what I'm going to try and talk about here is what to think about for the future, as soon as I get this thing on here. All right. All right, now, your last thing is turn it on. Okay, are we there? All right, good. All right, so in here, I'm trying to open up at this point the idea of what are new metaphors for network learning. And I will, with full disclosure, say this is because I needed to know where to go next as well. I spent the last 5 years as director of Lancaster Archival and Information Studies field school, and I'm moving back into the research area, and I want to know where to go next. And our social media and learning is one of the aspects, but where do I want to go in network learning? So really that is the question. What kind of ideas are going to take us forward? What has propelled network learning so far? What transformations are already in progress? And really, I'm stepping into a stream of research that's already ongoing. So sometimes I'll be talking about stuff that people say, yeah, we've been doing that for years, and other times I hope that something new will twig, at least for someone. So what metaphors and images beyond networks will help us make sense of new learning challenges? Where are we going to go with these sorts of things? And one of the other aspects of metaphors is to explain to others. Now, most of us have a lot of trouble explaining to people what it is we do. You say network learning, they go. So what can we collectively come up with kind of metaphors that would help explain where we're going? So before I forget to say that, I hope that all of you, when you present your papers, will also think of a metaphor and suggest that perhaps they can email their metaphors for network learning. So why metaphors? And I hope you can see, these are first quote from Thomas Kuhn: you don't see something until you have the right metaphor to let you perceive it. And I think that's the important thing here. We talk about arguments as war. This is the Lakoff and Johnson, probably the most famous network metaphor discussants. This is reading. So we talk about arguments as war because we conceive of them that way, and we act accordingly to the way we conceive of things. So really we have several reasons for why we use metaphors are useful. They structure our language and our expectations of experience. They explain new and abstract things with analogies to more concrete ones, and they open up new ways of looking at experience. So here we have Lakoff and Johnson ask us to think about, try to imagine a community, a culture where arguments are not viewed in terms of war. I mean, actually, it's quite difficult, where one person wins or loses. Imagine a culture where an argument is viewed as a dance, and participants are seen as performers, and the goal is to perform in a balanced and aesthetically pleasing way. And really, I think that's a wonderful image for network learning. It's not about one person telling somebody else what they ought to know. It's a dance that is performed. Well, we have images from other areas, and I would say I'm very heavily influenced by Gareth Morgan's ideas about images of organizations. I'm sure most of you who are attached to a management school here will have heard of him. And he thinks of organizations in terms of machines, organisms, their brains, their political systems, psychic prisons, flux and transformation, and instruments of domination. So we have a nice picture of the panopticon there. So is education a panopticon? Do we keep control and view everything that the students are doing? Raise your hands if you're learning analytics. Is the internet panopticon? Well, a lot of people are going to feel that it is. We also have images of learning, and of course the text here is too. I hope you can see the text. I will be sharing. Be sharing the slides at any point we want them, but I'm sure we'll be putting them up somewhere. So what are our images of higher education? Well, one of the ones that's coming through a lot recently is an engineering view, that efficiency, throughput, retention rate, graduation rate, modeling what to keep students in or outside education. But if we take another engineering metaphor and use it the other way, the nimble and agile idea from computing. A wonderful paper by Mike Twaddell and Dave Nichols about the Agile University. So there's an engineering perspective that is not just all about control and the building of structures. It is about responding in new ways. Other kind of ideas, of course, the authority, higher education. This is where the authorities are. This is where everybody who knows everything is. Okay, don't let anybody, let's go with that. Don't let anybody know that's not the case. Professors, experts, etc. Some places are parental, particularly when they take care of the first year experience and insist that people stay in dorms. Learning can be self-actualizing, exploration. It can be goal-oriented in the metrics. And we're having a nice discussion this morning in the doc seminar about playing the game of metrics. And I'm with you there. The alt metrics are playing the games of metrics. And it can be idea of place-based, campus and context, etc. And then we have a lot of ideas about knowledge as well, that it's emergent potentially, that it's in the individual, in the head, but probably not in network learning, because I think that cognitivism was down the bottom. So we know it's collective, and it's networked. One of the things we often forget is the aesthetics of it. The aesthetic versus instrumental, or what Roseblatt calls effort reading. So reading, for instance, for pleasure, the aesthetic, but also reading to intend to get information out. And I think that's something that we haven't engaged with, or I personally don't engage with a lot, but I really like Dresang's idea of synthetic reading. And that's, synergistic reading, where people are bringing stuff together, very much making sense of what you're reading in your own context. And I should nod to also the productive work environments, Carmel and Goodyear. more ideas about learning. I put down journey this morning, and again in the doc seminar, they said, you know, something about journey, learning being a journey, a process. There's the adventure and discernment and self-actualization. We think of it in ladders, trees, or networks, etc. And of course, we think of it as contained in books, but nice quote from Stephen King, books are uniquely portable magic. Is there enough magic in our network learning? Well, what about those internet metaphors? Sorry for those, the words are smaller than I expected, but lots of ideas about flow, water, streaming, flow, deluge, leak, tsunami, but we also surf, navigate, anchor, sometimes we pirate. It's a sea of information out there. We've got water, and then we've got land, and everything about this you'll notice is open, space, flow, unbordered. Even the land images are unfenced and borderless. Then we also get into some hunting ones, hunting and farming and food, information seekers, foragers and gleaners. Just bear that one in mind for a minute, we'll come back to it. Also, mining it as a resource, the internet. And a few more, freedom, play and adventure, it's Netscape Navigator, it's Internet Explorer, it's Mac Safari, and it, as an infrastructure, something that ought to be there, a more political take. And of course, the best capture of all this is the concept of the space of flows, Castell's. But also his idea of the timeless time, and we'll come back to that one as well. So one of the things about explaining things, here's just two examples. At the back of the room, you have a job to do on the second quote in a minute. First of all, the world of Second Life consists of nearly 500,000 acres of virtual land. So there we are, we're trying to figure out what the heck Second Life is. And it may be that, boy, those virtual worlds are down at the bottom is because we can't grasp that. And also, if you say virtual land is like a 3D website, I go, whoop. Okay, virtual land I can understand, 3D website, not really. So, at the back of the room, social media is like standing in the middle of the room and yelling, I like bagels. Come on, guys.
I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. There we are. That's a wonderful 20 metaphors that explain social media perfectly. Okay, so gleaners. Now, I picked up on this point of the gleaners, and this is from a paper about internet metaphors. And so I'm putting a few gleanings into this talk, which means if you don't know what gleaners are, you have a picture there that picking up the leftover seeds around the edge of fields after they've been harvested. So what are these extra little seeds we can get after the mainstream of network learning? So if we think of what is a change from gleaners to hunters? So instead of just going out there and finding, surfing, whatever, what if you're hunting for information? So what does that mean? This purposive search, what would that mean to network learning? Is our current online teaching practice grounded in the need for a critical mass of hunters rather than gatherers? And hunters are the ones who hunt out a MOOC, an online program, rather than the people who are passively receiving it. And if so, what does it all tell us about learning in the 21st century? So one of the things that in looking at these new metaphors is not just about new metaphors about network learning, what's happening new in the network area, but also what's happening new in learning altogether. And that's something that will come through as well in this talk. So what work has the network metaphor done for us? And in small print, for all of you challenge reading, on one side we have the definition from the CSALT site. Network learning, define network learning as learning which is communication, information, technology used to promote connections, etc. And my highlighting on that is not very good, but I want to pick out from this, as you read it, the network metaphor has opened up our attention to relations, that is, that which ties and the binds that happens between actors. And that's between learners and tutors here, and the learning community, and learning resources. And network learning is in fact early in considering the resources as well as the people involved. So It also evokes this concept of space. The space of possibilities for network learning, the space of potential student experiences is vast. So again, but with an idea of space, we now need to fill that with something a little bit more descriptive than a space. So advocate trying to find the words that make sense. Just one last comment there that it says it can be shared through text, voice, graphics, video, etc. Well, Martin showed the different media there. I always think that the point is to go from what's the underlying learning aspect you're trying to work with. And network learning has been very good about being agnostic about the particular kind of medium. And since multiple media are part of our everyday life, and multiple devices, I'm carrying 3 at the moment. Well, I count this one, that's 4. That's another one, that's 5. I have 2 in my bag there. So this is not the point. The point is not the device you're using. The point is what is the network learning that is happening there. So one of the things that's happening is it's creating these cross-boundary spaces. Now, in continuing the metaphors, I would say that we have leaky boundaries. That, as Sonia Livingston said, and this is from the network learning hot seats, the idea of connected learning is not just the technology can link home and school, but thereby school can develop the student-led, interest-driven learning, knowledge and expertise that students have developed out of school. So our boundaries are fading. Dupont, a colleague of mine, he's talking about students in a course in California, where they brought their work problem into the learning environment to crowdsource the response. And it's that kind of change of what it is you think is okay to put into one environment or another. Michelle Kalmar, a number of years ago, looked at the way these different environments were working together. Online students were taking stuff to their own home location. They were also bringing their own home location issues into the class. And by that way, they were connecting workplaces to school, schools to schools, regions to regions, etc. Very good for areas that have few people involved. One of the important things out of network learning, and I think this is one of the ones that I want to push forward, is the emphasis on the active, dynamic, emergent aspect of it. We've listed over there some of the kinds of theories, and again, Martin touched on some of these: the active networks, social networks, activity networks, socio-technical networks, community practice, etc. Coming up to the more recent connectivism. But as Jones and Esnol wrote, I hope I pronounced her name right, networks are dynamic systems that rely on self-reinforcement. Without sustaining activity, networks become moribund. And this is the point about the network doesn't exist unless it exists. I mean, it's a bit tautological, I know, but it is the reality of the effects coming back to create the next round. And that's something that we're dealing with constantly, that every time we put something new into the mix, it's changing what we're doing. So we're always constantly on this rolling wheel. You may remember from your physics about the penny on the tire, and when does it hit the ground? That's kind of what we're doing. Every so often we're looking at the ground and saying, oops, MOOCs, oops, Twitter, oops. But there's so much going on beforehand, and I think we're at the touching the ground point again. Visualizations, along with images, and the network image, the network metaphor is also brought in the concept of visualizations. So this is a thrust that's going forward into visualizing that massive quantities of data in a way that makes sense to people. But one thing I want, these are images, they are not the truth. For instance, if you take the wonderfully pretty picture, I mean, yeah, they're pretty, they're aesthetically pleasing, and I think actually sometimes we're looking at them for aesthetics, not for information. That is a two-dimensional representation of three-dimensional, at the very least, network. And we have to remember these are metaphors, and these are images, but they're also not the only ones that we have, and they are also very important about getting the message across. It is fairly quick to see what's going on in one of these, or to assume that we know what's going on. So this is the only visualization of these, but there's other kind of visualizations, going model building and the like, that are important metaphors for us. Oh, just to flip back just for a second, some of the social network analysis terms are also metaphors. I mean, the density. Everybody talks about the density of a network. Well, what is it that's actually dense in a network? I mean, if you think about it for a minute, there isn't a reality there that can be dense. So remember that we're using a metaphor. Other ones are, you know, the stars, brokers, isolates, cliques, structural wholes, paths. There aren't really any paths in reality. There's a path as a metaphor, and so on. So just to bear in mind that those are metaphors, and we should be careful about what everybody thinks they mean. So obviously wordle representations are so much fun. They're also so easy to do. So this is you. This is a wordle of the titles of this year's papers. So I wanted to see what was there. So what you have there, prominently, of course, is design, interdisciplinarity, opportunity, connect, context, community, networks, activity, practices, profession, research, academic. These are the kind of words that pop to the top as repeated. But what seems to be missing, and I love the titles. It's not necessarily not in your papers, but the words that are missing to me are knowledge, production, creation, crowd, collaboration, and then engagement with tools outside the educational area, such as GIS, graphical information systems, engagement with those different kinds of ways of explaining and networking the world. So where are we now, and where is this leading? I'm just gonna, that's pretty good. Transformations, translations, trends, 3 T's. So what are the current transformations? And these are transformations that we and all of us as network learning researchers, we've been speculating about or writing about. We've helped prepare audiences for these. First thing, these are the ones that I consider all but mainstream at the moment. Richard Andrews and I wrote this e-learning theory and practice book, and when we were writing this book in 2011, we really felt the need to stimulate discussion about learning and about teaching and education that took notice of the transformations happening outside educational institutions. So that was one of the thrusts here, was really to think about what the trend in learning and knowledge production was that was affecting and being affected by networked learning and learning in a networked world. Those have found that the containers of knowledge, we say, the schools, universities, workplaces, trades, professional organizations, and libraries were becoming increasingly porous. And I did try and make an image of a vessel with holes in it that was so that stuff was leaking out, and then you put that in water because it's when leaking out is also leaking back in. Couldn't draw it too well. I need more practice. But anyway, so what we saw then and what we still see is a transformation in who learns what, from whom, where, when, and under what circumstances. And my social network analytic bias will say who does what with whom, where, and when, and under what circumstances. So who originates, validates, authorizes knowledge, which could affect the direction of knowledge flow. It can affect where knowledge ends up, the sources and the sinks and the sites for knowledge. Where and when learning is occurring is mobile, of course, enacted in multiple daily instances. And my favorite phrase here is not just in time, but a phrase given to me by a teacher in school was learning in just as much time as I have. So that probably resonates with a lot of people. And also, we were grappling with how knowledge is continuously emergent. Because of this regeneration, this network that is constantly being recreated. So I tried, I'm so sad to hear the word e-learning is in there, because I've been trying desperately to redefine it to mean something different. I wanted to define it as learning on and through the internet, formally, informally, and non-formally, for education, work, personal entertainment, and representing a transformation in how, where, and with whom we learn, share information, and build knowledge. I think that I need to find a brand new term, so if anybody would like to come up with a new term that isn't one of all the above, that will just go out there like a virus. But we need that one. So as I said, at the time we were writing, we had to keep saying, this is not a transfer of learning to the online stage. We're still trying to tell people, no, you don't, it's a new thing. But it's really not bound by institutional structures. It is sustained over a lifetime, but enacted in those multiple daily instances. It's mobile, and that is the wide idea of what mobile, including theoretical perspectives. But it's also particularly engaged at through technical and social decisions. So not just what the technology is, but how are you going to use it, and how those two together make for an e-learning experience. Those changes, so what kind of changes were happening? We had increasing organization around social connections societally. And that has been leading to the ideas about learning to learn with others, but particularly how to learn how to operate in networks. And again, I think that's something that is not as well publicized as it needs to be, is that we need to learn how to operate in networks. Different from learning on our own. E-learning, I've said most of that, but one of the things that also we've learned over the while is to be e-learners. In other words, those kinds of learners who can pick up the information and use it and be good at learning with others, be good knowledge creators. The rise of participatory culture, so again, from all that, we were learning to be social and participatory learners. So, okay, I'm not very good at social media stuff, but I'm learning that I ought to do it. I have to get further past the ought to the actually doing it, as most of us do. But that is something we are now trying to teach the next generation to do, is to be more social and participatory. And the other aspect is big data, which I will come back to. But in there is also not just learning about big data, but learning data literacy. One of the things that I picked up from Chris Jones' book, Chris's book, Network Learning, Educational Paradigm for the Age of Digital Networks, he's talking about Latour's idea of translation. Translation in actor network theory describes the links, the connections between actors. It's not a force or another actor, it is a dynamic transformation and association that takes place between actors. So quoting Latour, translation takes a specialized meaning. It does not transport causality, but induces two mediators into coexisting. So from this kind of reading of this, I come towards the idea of the constructive life of networks. And we've seen some of this already, and this is again one reason we see that that network learning changes the actants themselves. So we find that learners who are in e-learning environments start to take on different and new roles. So they become learner leaders. They start teaching other people, they start bringing in resources, they start taking on a different role than is traditionally thought for the learners. Now, I'm sure that this was happening in other classes at graduate level, but what we see now is it's happening more pervasively. So they change it from listeners to self-directed leaders and learners. And that's something that's coming out of the network. So one of the things in gleanings then is, and I'm not sure if this comment is profound or obvious, what if we think of network learning as the outcome rather than the input? What if we take our attention away from how to create network learning environments to looking at network learning as that which happens, what comes out of a network learning experience? Now, it's again, it's tautological, but what if we then change from ideas of network learning as learning in which communication, information, technology is used to promote connections to network learning is that which results from the active engagement of connected individuals? Like, leanings don't have an answer, they're just to open up an idea. What are we facing these days? And how much time do we have to face it? I want to go through a few big trends and they're metaphors. The first one I'm going to start with is social media, and here we get some more quotes from that one side. So social media is like wind energy. Wind is free, but the wind generator is not. I think we're all wind generators, right? Or it's like a puppy. It's cute and cuddly and looks easy to take care of at first, and then you realize that it needs constant attention and care. Yes, it is a young medium. So, segueing a little bit into some research we've been doing, my project in social media and learning with colleagues, Anatoly Grus et al. There. We did a questionnaire to ask higher education instructors how they were using social media in their classes. And the reason to do this is really to examine the kind of views, the images, the ideas, the preconceived notions they had about these early adopters of social media in teaching. So from the literature, we thought there were three reasons that they would be doing this. First of all, to expose students to practices of the expected future work and communication settings. That comes through a lot. People need to know how to use social media in their next job, be proficient communicators. We thought they would try and extend the learning environment to engage others, so bring in guest lecturers, etc. And to promote a collaborative approach to learning that involves learning with others, building knowledge communities, and greater reflection. So, collaborative learning ideas. What did we find? So this just gives you a quick look at what media were being used from social networking sites, document sharing, multimedia repositories, microblogs, etc., all the way over to the asynchronous discussion. And the reason I like this slide is because if you see, it's two things. Were they using it inside their learning management system or outside? I think we're finding that the only thing a learning management system is really good for is asynchronous discussion. So again, if we're thinking about this is a little segue to institutional ideas. Obviously, your learning management system is not doing a good job of helping support the use of social media in teaching. Now, so it also tells us these are early adopters. These are people who are out there before the system has gone in place. So we asked them two questions. We asked them how the most useful social media tool was used in their courses and how social media was used in one specific course. And we coded the answers from that. And I don't expect you to read that. I just want to show that there's a range of answers, sharing, discussing, sharing with instructors, organizing for instructors, reflective learning, etc. So these give us a good idea of some of the reasons they were using it. So we did a factor analysis to find out what kind of things hang together there. So what hangs together there is they are trying to promote collaboration, learning with others, and greater reflection. And we've seen three different factors around an individual, group, and community orientation. So that's the reasons that we thought these were good for collaboration, the individual participation, group participation, and community. So that's one of the reasons they were using it, and this is across tools. So were they exposing students to practices? Yes, there was one factor that said about reaching outside the classroom. Were they extending the classroom? Well, there's a factor, but it was used by so few that we aren't really sure what it means. So what we find, if we think that you can extend the learning environment, my view says that, and there aren't very many people doing it. And again, how do we project that image so that they can think the metaphor that will let them think about that? So the thing that we didn't think about was, of course, that it was used for organizing your teaching. So it's kind of like, did I not read the activity theory network triangle? Yes, sometimes people have to get their work done. So that's back to this side that says you're going to see that kind of mix. They're seeing it as a way to organize work. That's not quite the same as what we think of a network learning. So that give us some of the ideas of their attitudes. Big data. Well, my work on metaphors is done for me already by some network learners. Simon Buckingham-Shum had already done some metaphors for big data. And again, they're kind of similar to the ones that we got from the internet. We've got some spatial landscape ones, some resource ones, some food. Surveillance I didn't have before, but industrial's different. Liquid is not different. So the only thing I want to say from this, their analysis of metaphors, is if what is different and not listed there, that would be in a vision of network learning. Then how do we know that big data is different from network learning? Can we compare them and let us understand others' perspectives? So given that this is a learning analytics set of people, if this is the way, the metaphors that they're using about data to analyze learning, what is it that we think is in network learning? What metaphors would we want to be able to pass over to the learning analytics people? Well, perhaps one of our favorite, would you like data raw or cut? And former colleague Jeff Backer, raw data is both an oxymoron and a bad idea. To the contrary, data should be cooked with care. Is network learning a set of raw ingredients, or is it a cooked meal? Is any meal not a set of raw ingredients? I'll leave it with you. So again, data is a metaphor that drives reflection. Data are not a simple reflection of a world that is, but are thoroughly produced, and this is a profound implication of the kind of questions that could be asked and answered. To remember again that the data that you're collecting is the data that's going to let you know what questions you're going to ask, and therefore you're going to look in that sequence of what data you collected. This is the trap of all procedures, that once they get reified, we don't have it open and we start using what we have in order to measure what we have. So it's the caveat now, we learned it before, that you end up measuring what you can measure rather than what you're intending to. The other part about this is, and again, this is from Jeff Backer's work, it can be data that is served and cooked up by two programmers. So, as he said, with the world of string theory upon us, it's clear we cannot think in the necessary 10 plus 1 dimensions and the complex geometries they entail. When our learning environments have to be measured with the data analytics, we can't think that in a minute. I mean, really think about learning on the web, knowledge production on the web. I mean, it's just too big for us to get. And so we have our 10 plus 1 dimensions, it's too much for us. And therefore we are now moving into the idea of either programs talking to each other, or really moving into the idea of hybrids. So again, so including the complexity of this 10 plus dimensions and the learning analytics, the images become more important, because if we're only able to think about a set of extremely complicated equations through how somebody's explained them to us, what metaphors they've used, we're going to start manipulating that metaphor. We're going to say, oh, I want the ethics module in there. I want the security feature in there, not knowing what is in that security feature. So we really are thinking now about what our human-computer programmed world is going to be like. How are we going to trust those metaphors, and what metaphors are we going to use to make sure that the right kind of idea is passed across? And as things are made into objects as an object-oriented programming, we'll need to know the use of those, the algorithmic use of those objects. Objects as capable of collective action, perhaps, and capable of processing new data. We need new data. We need to know what is going to happen with that data, what the new objects are going to do with that data. So as I say, it leads us into hybrids, because we're already pretty much hybrids. My big point here is that big data is people. It's not just computers. It's definitely a set of people putting data out there. It's the crowdsourcing, citizen science, citizen journalism, human sensors, as digital volunteers, digital data collectors, and in fact, every phone that's in the room, you're all data collectors, or it's data exhaust, depending on how you think about it. But the idea of human computation is to let humans do what humans do better than machines, and do that in collaboration with the machines. And we've got a few kind of examples. The Galaxy Zoo, as many of you probably know, humans are better at figuring out that picture is a galaxy than machines are. But that's changing. There's going to, the more algorithms are created. So things like CAPTCHA, which is doing. Sorry, you're doing CAPTCHA every time that you have to put in a name. You have to type what you see. People are better at typing what they see than the computers are at analyzing lots of kind of things like handwriting and the like. So these are human-computer combinations that are definitely around big data. Same time, people are always making learning and sharing communities, even out of that, the extreme sort of instrumental ideas of something like Mechanical Turk, where you're just getting paid 2 cents to do something. Even in a place like that, the hits worth turking for comes up where people are recommending which hits, human intelligence tasks are good ones to do. So what we're always seeing is, again, everything's coming out from every data collection, instrumental aspect produces some kind of human community and so on. It's still that cycling through. One of the ways it ends up coming out is in this wonderful project, the Kathmandu Living Lab. Namabudithoki did his degree in Illinois when I was there. He went back to Nepal and started teaching people how to do open street mapping. It's sort of an open version of Google Maps. And slowly, as of course, when the Nepal earthquake hit, his people were already ready there. The systems were already set up, already ready to go. So again, where you didn't see anything of that big curve, when the problem hit, you hit the ground and you see what, almost literally, you see what has been happening behind. So I can recommend having a look at his work. Another hybrid that not talked about much in the learning area is the idea of new artisans. So there's another kind of hybrid, and this one is across employment, but across disciplines perhaps, is to think of where the expertise now combines with tasks, again, that humans do best. So, as these authors say, we expect to see growing employment among the ranks of new artisans, licensed practical nurses and medical assistants, teachers, tutors, and learning guides at all educational levels, kitchen designers, etc. These workers will adeptly combine technical skills with interpersonal interaction, flexibility, and adaptability to offer services that are uniquely human. Note that it says they will combine technical skills. There's a hybridity there as well. And this is an interesting one for us all to think about where network learning is going to help in that network. Oh, did I say something about puppies before? This is really a question. This is a crowdsourcing question. A hybrid usually means two, right? What the heck do you call it when it's more? If we call it a mongrel, poor thing, that has very bad negative connotations. Mixed breed, okay, not so bad. Crossbreed, not so good. Cur, really bad, but it's actually it's actually a cross of two. Design your dogs. Again, usually a cross of two. So now that dogs, but learners also come in this kind of variety. So how are we going to? We used to have classes where everybody would be in their first year, second year, third year, graduate, whatever. Now when we open up a MOOC, you've got everybody. You got a bunch of mongrels in there. So what do we do with that? Anyway, so it's bleeding. Please, what do we call it when it's more than one? Without calling it mongrel, because it's not a good word. Now, how's my time? And we'll see how much complexity we can talk about. Oh, too complex. So this is something that I was talking about, getting the cycling back of things affecting each other. Some of the things that we see very strongly is structure giving way to complexity. And in a sense, I want always to think about that it is structure that gives way to complexity that creates structure that gives way to complexity. It's the constant opening up. And that's why right now, and my talk here is really to open up before we go back to more structure. You have to have structure. It's order plus chaos. So what we want to to do every so often is remember we got to throw a bit of chaos in there. So what are the structures that we're getting? So Castell's always recording. The clock time of the industrial age is being gradually replaced by what I conceptualize as timeless time. The kind of time that occurs when in a given context there's a systematic perturbation in the sequential order of the social practices performed in this context. Now, one of the things okay, so we're all working all the time, 24/7, all out in asynchronous and multiple different ways. And that's his point here. But what he's said here is that it's something that's happening again. There's a perturbation in the sequential order of the social practices. So it sounds like it's something that can happen again and again. So the unfreezing and the refreezing. In the education area, quotes here, the concept of the educational pyramid is being dismantled. We're rethinking the established scholarly distinctions between various levels. And the last quote here, the new center is indefinite interactions taking place with a course of nature which is not fixed and complete, but which is capable of direction to new and different results through the mediation of intentional operation. And you wouldn't believe that was from 1929. Must have been a difficult year too. So what are some metaphors? And I'm going to go through these relatively high speed here. Networks, of course, and there's more ideas from Castells. Again, the networks in the space of flows are learning networks. I think networks do a good job in the social network analytics sense of also handling complexity. They ask you to think about a lot more than just those two-dimensional pictures. My own ideas of talking about lightweight and heavyweight engagement with contributors and collective enterprises. Another way of trying to think about the complexity of what it is people are trying to do. It's not that a crowd is that thing, it is the lightweight interactions, in other words, the quick in and out rather than the more communal ideas. Ecologies, we'll go back to the wonderful work of Bonnie Nardi about information ecology. It's a complex system of parts and relationships. It is balance found in motion. Now the thing is, we can understand an ecology, we kind of go, oh yeah, I get that. But unfortunately when I get to this one, I don't quite get that. So this takes a lot of understanding, and here's an idea that you go, oh yeah, ecology. But really we're talking very much about the same kind of thing in these two. Building in the wicked problem. This is the problem I'm talking about, that what you do changes the environment in which you're doing it, and also other things are changing a lot. So the e-learning facilitates new roles for participants. Global reach and open enrollment changes the whole makeup of the learning community. Changes in technology. So Google Food Trends was doing fine until they actually changed their own technology, which meant their own algorithm wasn't collecting the right stuff anymore. New divisions of labor. Oh, do have a look at the sheep market. They did this in 2006 and paid people 2 cents to draw a picture of a sheep. And there you have it. You can go look at every single one. Whoever thought there was crowdsourced art? New divisions of labor. And this idea of gig work, which is a new one. I might mention that one in a minute. So all this has consequences. So it changes the ownership of ideas, of data and contributions, and of course we know we have the Creative Commons licensing. But I like what Jared Lanier's idea of who owns the future. That when you contribute to a crowdsourcing enterprise, perhaps you ought to be paid, credited, something. So it's an interesting idea. But perhaps best to wrap up the complexity idea is this phrase from my colleague Chip Bruce, building an airplane in the air. Now he was talking about a new group that was learning, a real learning community that was starting from scratch and trying to figure out what they were doing. And he talked about building an airplane in the air. So this bottom-up approach reflects a community of practice, and as a result, you ask different questions about it. When it begins or ends, whether it reaches its goals, makes makes less sense. A revised set of questions arises, like what does the community value? How does it evolve? How do members facilitate interaction? There are implications, and I think I probably don't have a lot of time to go through these, from the fact that, in a sense, they're a lot of text. The basic idea here is taking some of the ideas that that are already been talking about today, things of going from structure to managing complexity. But in the network learning area, one of the interesting things is that is connecting through networks. So it's the person, David Lancaster, was giving a talk, he's a librarian. He said that it used to be in the libraries that people would be led to the resources about businesses. And now, he says, no, what you need to do is connect them to the employers. So the shift from information in the textual form to information embodied in actors is an interesting one and very important. So connecting to employers and connecting to networks. A lot of reframing, and this is something that is one of the main tenets in our 2011 book, is to reconsider what you think is learning. All sorts of different things we're learning. We're learning how to debate online. We're learning how to behave online. We're learning to bring in different kinds of experiences. I'm particularly always fascinated by the patients like me site, where experiences become the data. Rather than them becoming just experiences, they actually become the input for what people are doing. And some of those things really, this whole set of differences. And connectivity, learn to do connectivity, again, that's the Siemens and Downs ideas of connectivism, that learning to connect resources together. We also want to reframe for these new work conditions. Gig work. Has anybody heard of gig work before? I only heard it like last week or something. That work is like musicians, you have to get a gig. So again, if this is the way that work is going, what are we teaching? What is network learning? What's the impact on network learning of preparing people for an entrepreneurial culture, gig work, network work, crowdsourced work, entrepreneurship, and to be new artisans? Okay, so I think, depending on what's next here, I got different, okay, so. I'm not going to talk about this, but I also thought one of the things that we could do as collectively, as a learning community, a network learning community, is come up with a set of high impact practices, equivalent to these ones by Koo, high impact educational practices. What would be the high impact practices for network learning? Now, I had an idea there, but you can't see that because I don't have enough time. So basically, I've begun listing. One side is about network literacy practices, and the other side is about network membership practices. Membership, because social networks is my thing. That's the one I always pay more attention to. But this is really only a beginning, and I would love to hear people about what you think would be high impact network learning practices. So, final thought. Network learning. Make a meal of it. So let me leave you. What images, metaphors can we list to help explain to others this concrete phenomenon? That is a phenomenon that is legitimate in its impermanence, emergent from the actions of participant, ghostly in its presence and persistence, created and sustained through continuous reinforcement and practice. So go forth and metaphor.
Thank you very much. It was fascinating. It really was. Okay, we can probably take about 10 minutes from refreshments for questions, comments, ideas, metaphors, anything that occurs to anybody. This feels a bit like doing an auction. First bid.
You're a bit on metaphors.
I've got my own question. Thank you.
Should I start?
No, you should have this.
maybe I'll stand on this side, so this side can have a different view.
Thanks so much. Hi, Caroline. Deborah Ross from the University of Edinburgh. I really enjoyed that talk a lot. I had a little bit of backup from Twitter to ask you this, so that's why I have the same going first. I was just wondering, you were talking about thinking about network learning as an outcome rather than an input, which I thought was really interesting. And I wondered if you might reflect a bit for us about what the either pedagogical or methodological implications of that shift might be for us.
I was actually hoping you guys would answer that question, but no, I will try. I think in the research side, it's fairly quote unquote straightforward. You look at what the outcome is. You start looking at the network learning that has happened. I think in the input side, I think this is where the high impact practices become an idea of how to do this. And in a sense, maybe I go back to the cooking idea, is that if the meal is the intention, what is it you have to, how do you get a balanced diet into that meal such that you expect to have an outcome which is nourishing, shall we say? Methodologically, I think we do a lot on, we do a lot. I think the literatures are somewhat separate. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think we need to get the literatures that talk about the outcomes. So, in particular, I'm hoping to spend more time looking at the learning that's happening on the World Wide Web. How are people doing it out there? What is happening in that wider context? And then see how that leaks back into the network learning. It is circular, so in a sense, some of it may be process-oriented research, rather than setting up and testing. What's the process? Answering what is it that happens first, second, third, fourth. So years ago, we did that for we were interviewing online learners and finding out how they came. We had a sequence of how they came into the environment. So that the on-ramp, and then the staying present, because it was very difficult to stay present. They had to make themselves visible in a way that they weren't used to. And then there was an exit as well. So there was a phase for exiting, and Michelle Cashmere did a lot more work on the exit phase as well, because the exit phase out of one network learning environment is the entry into another. So in the university context, leaving one class is going on to the next. Leaving one program is going into the work world. So some of that was saying, what's the outcome of this one in order to take it into the next one? So the process there was important. I think with the MOOCs, we haven't seen, well, I will ask somebody to tell me if they know research. We haven't seen, I think, research that shows about the on-ramping, the staying there, and the follow-on from that. So, yeah, I guess methodologically, I'd like to see more process. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question? We've got a few more minutes. See around the screen. What's the question? Thank you.
You mentioned the word agility, and coming from software engineering perspective, and seeing that the term agile being used by everyone in every kind of context, I wonder what you mean by agility in the context of the
The general idea is it's absolutely the nimble and agile from computing, and Mike Twagdale and Dave Nichols are computing people, but we also have a shared interest in university education. So what I mean by that is systems that are able to be more modular, systems that are able to do quick changes. So the university systems, almost universally, are very locked into their categories. They can't change. I mean, going to online was so difficult. But what if you want to go to 6-week courses when everything's locked into a 15-week semester? How do you do that if you haven't got the structure there? They're not nimble in that way. They can't respond quickly. Even like the employment structures are not, people go into universities and do research and teaching and service. Even those structures are very rigid. There isn't a a way for you to quickly bring in somebody for a year. You have to go through, you have to apply for the grant, you have to apply for this, for that. Everything's very, very long term. So how does a university become more flexible? How does it think about different? And a lot of management schools have actually, done these, the weekend, the executive programs. That's an example of trying to be a bit more nimble. But I don't think we're anywhere near where we could be with these things. It really means breaking down a lot of those rules. I mean, one of the interesting things that I think that some of the MOOCs now are offering credit for some of the courses, and so if you've done that course and you've completed that MOOC, you now come into the university with that credit already. The question is, what if you're in the university already? So we're keeping these things very separate at the moment. So the executive programs are kept over there as executive programs. E-learning has been many times kept over there as the e-learning. And we're having a lot of trouble integrating it because we're trying to put big learning management systems on instead of letting it 1,000 flowers bloom. So yeah, I do mean absolutely the computing sense of legal management.
Thank you. Right, a final question, if there is one. We are over time, so could move on. Hopefully it's a burning issue. Okay, well thank you very much, Caroline. It was a really good start to the conference and a good overview.